All right, let's jump straight into this explainer because today we are looking at a completely bizarre paradox in South Africa's economy. On one hand, you've got the big macroeconomic numbers flashing green, showing us these vital signs of life and signaling that things are really on the up and up. But if you actually go up to someone on the street and ask, hey, how's your wallet feeling? You are going to get a wildly different story. It's literally a tale of two economies, and we really need to break down this massive, confusing gap between high-level corporate data and the harsh reality on the ground. Seriously, if you've scrolled through any of the glowing financial headlines recently, you probably caught yourself asking one very specific, totally valid question. Who is actually feeling this growth? I mean, it's basically the skeptic's mantra right now. And honestly, it hits the nail on the head. We've got everyday folks reading these super positive reports about economic recovery and then looking at their own bank accounts in utter confusion. Today, we're unpacking that exact tug of war. We're talking about booming corporate growth on one side and the absolute crushing weight of daily household costs on the other. So, let's kick things off with the good news, the whole reason these flashy headlines even exist in the first place. 44. According to the absolute latest PMI data, which, by the way, essentially measures the purchasing activity and health of the manufacturing sector, South Africa's private sector just hit its strongest growth in 44 months. Think about that time frame. That is almost 4 full years. So on paper, business activity is absolutely booming again. Companies across the board are seeing increased sales, they're moving way more product, and they're reporting production numbers that we just haven't seen in a very, very long time. And it's not just local data making waves either. The global heavyweights are officially taking notice of this momentum. Moody's, one of the biggest, most influential credit rating agencies out there, is suddenly sounding highly, highly optimistic about the country's economic rebound. When a giant institution like Moody's starts projecting confidence, it's a huge signal. It means global investors are looking at South Africa, assessing the corporate landscape, and basically saying, okay, we have renewed trust in the financial future here, at least, at the corporate level. Now, what's actually pulling the weight and driving this trend? It's the heavy hitters of the economy. We're talking manufacturing, exports, logistics, and mining. These sectors are experiencing a massive surge right now. Why? Well, global demand for commodities is way up, and these specific industries are perfectly positioned to cash in on those international needs. They are the giant engines of the private sector, and right now, they are running incredibly hot. They're exporting raw materials, they're moving freight, and honestly, they're painting a really profitable, rosy picture for corporate balance sheets and high-level investors. But here is the absolute core of our paradox. In the corporate boardroom, things are great. We see corporate growth, increased sales volumes, and Moody's singing praises. Business is booming. But step out of the boardroom and walk into an average living room? Totally different universe. That living room reality is defined by rising fuel prices, a stubbornly weak rand, and budgets that are stretched to the absolute limit. There is this massive, super uncomfortable gap between the macroeconomic corporate victories and the microeconomic household struggles. It's like two completely different countries existing at the exact same time. Just think about the daily squeeze facing everyday people right now. We've got persistent unemployment that just refuses to budge, right? That puts immense stress on single-income households. Then there are the lingering, incredibly frustrating concerns over load shedding disrupting daily life. And what about small businesses? Imagine running a local bakery or a corner shop, just trying to keep your doors open while you're reading about record-high manufacturing numbers for giant corporations. It feels entirely disconnected, especially when a weak rand makes importing even basic supplies insanely expensive for the little guy. And that weak rand, it trickles down directly to the most painful place of all, the grocery bill shock. I mean, we've all been there. You're standing at the supermarket till, watching the total climb higher and higher for just basic everyday necessities. In that moment, high-level corporate economic growth feels like a complete myth. The psychological shock of seeing the price of a simple loaf of bread, a carton of milk, or cooking oil skyrocket over the past year is incredibly real. Those painfully expensive groceries are literally wiping out whatever tiny wage gains households might be making. It's pretty tough for an ordinary family to celebrate a 44-month high in private sector growth when a standard basket of food costs more today than it ever has in history. Right next to those groceries, we have the nightmare of skyrocketing fuel prices. Now, remember those logistics companies we just talked about, the ones that are booming and driving all that private sector growth? Well, while they might be turning a massive profit, moving bulk goods around the country, guess who actually absorbs the final inflated cost of that expensive diesel at the pump? The end consumer. When it costs an absolute fortune just to commute to work or drop the kids off at school, a national corporate growth rate offers zero comfort. It's just another relentless, non-negotiable expense squeezing the consumer's budget from all sides.
And the thing is, these rising costs for households aren't happening in a vacuum. Global shockwaves have a direct line straight to your wallet. International conflicts, general geopolitical tensions around the world, and the crazy spikes in global oil prices create this vicious, unavoidable cycle. A conflict happening thousands of miles away directly impacts what it costs to transport goods locally right here in South Africa. And since almost everything we consume is transported by road, that imported inflation instantly inflates the cost of the food sitting on your local supermarket shelves. The global storm always hits the local consumer the hardest.
Because of all this chaos, we actually need to introduce a moment of healthy skepticism. Have you heard of temporary stockpiling? Some analysts are deeply, deeply concerned that this massive 44-month high in corporate growth might actually just be a short-lived illusion. Why? Because businesses might just be hoarding goods, they're stockpiling inventory out of fear of all those global supply chain uncertainties we just talked about, rather than everyday consumers actually having the money to buy more products. If this corporate growth is mostly just panic buying in the boardroom instead of real, sustained household demand, we could simply be looking at a temporary economic bubble that is bound to burst.
But hold on, it is absolutely not all doom and gloom. Let's shift gears into some actionable optimism here. Because periods of intense economic uncertainty, like this wild paradox we're in right now, often create incredible hidden opportunities. There's a massive silver lining for the builders, the creators, and the innovators out there. When the economic ground is shifting and these giant corporations are scrambling, bloated, and trying to adjust to global supply chain chaos, that is exactly when new, agile foundations can be laid by everyday people who can spot the gaps.
The real takeaway here is that young South Africans and nimble small business owners can actually leverage these chaotic economic conditions. Smart entrepreneurs adapt quickly, right? An agile online entrepreneur doesn't have the massive overhead, the giant warehouses, or the heavy field dependencies that are currently strangling those traditional corporations. While households are feeling the squeeze, individuals can start building new income streams entirely online, completely bypassing those local bottlenecks. You can start new, highly agile businesses that solve the exact supply chain and delivery problems the big guys are struggling with. In times of disconnect, uncertainty breeds opportunity. You just have to know exactly where to look. Which brings us to a final, really provocative thought to wrap up this explainer. Should we believe the hype, or are we just tired of promises? Has South Africa genuinely turned an economic corner with this private sector boom? Or is this just another fleeting moment of boardroom optimism before even more economic pressure hits the everyday consumer's wallet? It is a fascinating, complex paradox to watch unfold. Keep a close eye on those corporate headlines, for sure, but always, always measure them against your own grocery receipts. Thanks for joining me to unpack this, and whatever you do, never stop questioning the data.